I'm recording. So firstly, I want to thank everybody who's taken the time out to join us for tonight's fireside chat. And of course, to thank David Morris for hosting it. David, as some of you may know, is the director of our British Friends of Ariel University. His family very kindly were the benefactors of our Medical Simulation Center, which is the leading medical simulation center in Israel. It's used to train our doctors in the Dr. Miriam and Sheldon G. Adelson Medical School, as well as our nursing staff, our physiotherapy students, etc. And it's also used by the IDF, MDA, and various other search and rescue units in Israel. And it's been a really flagship project for the university. Our university is Israel's newest university. We got full university status in 2012. In that time, until today, we grew to around 16,000 students. We as a university take as a core principle our social responsibility, and as such, we're the leading academic institution in Israel with Ethiopian students, actual numbers on campus, which is, of course, comes with a lot of challenges because most, if not many of them, are first-time academic students in their families and come with a host of various challenges, which we've got very unique systems of dealing with. We also have the leading program in Israel to help students who are autistic, on the autistic spectrum, and many other kinds of students from minority groups in Israel. So that's a very important aspect of our university. Also, our university, being the newest university in Israel, our aim is to be the best in whatever we can and not the sixth best. So we've tried to look at areas which things are needed in Israel rather than what already exists. As such, we now have the leading compact particle accelerator program in the world, the Strategic Family Center for Compact Accelerators, where we're doing groundbreaking research on cancer treatment using electron and proton lasers. We are the only university in Israel has a on-campus winery where we are developing grapes that have been destroyed in the past, the traditional grapes going back to King David's time, and making traditional Israeli Jewish wine that had not been around for nearly 1,000 years. And of course, we are Israel's second largest engineering school, with a very vibrant research part of the university, which will be discussed tonight. And of course, anybody wants to know more about the university and how to partner with us to advance the research we're doing, we're happy to contact us, and we'd be very glad to speak to them and tell them more about the university. And guys, I want to thank everybody who's come, the panel has come together, and I hope everyone enjoys tonight.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And welcome, everyone. It's good to have you all here, albeit from different parts of the world. I wish we could do this in person. I feel very humbled sitting here with two quite eminent scientists, especially since I just about managed to escape to get through my science exams in high school. So it's quite a humbling experience for me. On one side, I have Dr. Gor Roshwal, who is a managing director at aMoon in Israel with over 20 years of healthcare industry and finance experience. He was CEO at several public and private biotech companies, and he was a vice president at Venrock before that. He was previously started his career as a doctor in private practice in New York. And on the other side of my screen, I have Larry Love. Larry is the CEO of Ariel Scientific Innovations Limited, which I'm assuming is the tech transfer office for Ariel. He was general manager of CIFAR, a startup company developing innovative image capture cards. And before that, he was serving as the R&D manager at Medical Enterprises, a medical device company in Israel. Before joining Ariel University, Larry was head of business development at Ramot, the technology transfer office of Tel Aviv University. Before I forget to do this, if anyone has any questions which I'd like to ask towards the end of this, please go onto your Zoom group chat and I will try and fill those questions afterwards. So when I was asked to speak today with my two hosts, I had to try and figure out with Adrian what I was going to talk about. And not being particularly scientific, I counted that one out immediately. I didn't really want to talk about COVID. I'm all COVIDed out. So I thought perhaps we could talk about universities and university startups and venture capital funds and how they work together and how they collaborate together, specifically in Israel, and whether there are better ways for them to be able to work together in the future. Gore, like me, like us in our company here, you probably see quite a lot of companies every single year. And besides those companies selling themselves to you, you probably have to sell yourself to those companies. And probably, unlike us, you have a more difficult task than we do because you're dealing with startups. You're dealing with founders who probably haven't come across VCs before. And they'll look at you, maybe they'll look at you as a great vampire squid, someone who's just looking to take advantage of them, someone who's trying to make a quick buck out of them. And what I really want to understand is what makes aMoon particularly attractive to these founders, these startups and universities. And if you can give us a little bit of a background about aMoon, the origins of aMoon, about the founder of aMoon as well, and your own experience, and why a startup company would rather go with yourselves than any other VC.
Thank you, David. First of all, thank you very much for the introduction and to Ariel University for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here. I think you've asked one of the key questions that we spend a tremendous amount of time on, because in the end of the day, there are other funds out there and good entrepreneurs will get the money, and we want to be with good entrepreneurs. So let me tell you a little bit about the background of our fund and why we hopefully will become the partners of those good entrepreneurs. So aMoon is a relatively young fund. It's about 4.5 years old at this point. It started out as the family office of Marius Nacht. Marius is one of the co-founders of Checkpoint Software. Checkpoint, as you may know, is currently Israel's largest company by market cap. Back in 1993, they started it up, and they were the inventors of the firewall. Okay, so a really important part of what your computers have today and stopping, cyber attacks, etc. About 10 years ago, Marius's father passed away from cholangiocarcinoma. It's a type of cancer of the liver, or part of the liver, if you will. And in that process, he recognized three things. The first was, no matter how much money you have, sometimes it doesn't make a difference. The second one was that the healthcare system could be better. And the third one was that he wanted to do something about it. And if you ever have the opportunity to meet Marius, and he's not on the phone, so I have the opportunity to tell you what a truly humble and wonderful person he is, because he cares. And I think that that's the first thing that makes a difference about aMoon, and it truly trickles down. If you look at the two co-founders of aMoon, our second co-founder is Dr. Yair Shindel. Yair started out as he trained as a doctor in Israel and did his training in Israel. And then he joined the Navy SEALs in Israel, Shayat at 13. And he was a combat medic, and he was eventually the chief medical officer of Shayat at 13 of the Navy SEALs. He then went from there to Harvard Business School. And from Harvard Business School, he then did a startup in Boston, and then he came back to Israel, and he did a couple of startups in Israel, including a couple of NGOs, which I will talk about for a few seconds. And then he was called to the Prime Minister's office to be the CEO of Digital Israel, which was a bureau that was trying to digitalize healthcare in Israel. And then along with Marius, he started up aMoon. And what I want you to look at those two people, amongst many things, is that they both care about having impact. And I think that is one of the key things. People who are willing to be entrepreneurs are passionate about something. And if you can't match that passion, if you can't want to have impact, they're not interested in working with you. So I think that's the first thing. They want to know that you have passion and you care, and that comes right from the top of our fund. We want to truly have impact. Now, where we want to have impact is also important. We're called aMoon for two reasons. For those of you whose Hebrew is sufficient, aMoon means trust. So emunah is trust between you and God, if you will, belief, faith. aMoon is trust between people. So the second thing that's exceedingly important is that there's trust. And for good entrepreneurs are looking for people who are trustworthy to work with, and hopefully we are that. And we care very much about partnering. So part of the things that entrepreneurs look for are partners. And within that then comes where else we want to have an impact. We are looking to build the health tech industry in Israel. Okay, that's exceedingly important to us. There are currently about 1,600 healthcare startups in Israel, believe it or not, and that's 83,000 jobs. And we're looking to broaden and deepen the depth of managerial experience in health tech in Israel as part of our mission. And in doing that, we're trying to create bridges between Israel and the rest of the world when it comes to health tech. We go to the best academic centers. We want to find the best entrepreneurs. And those bridges are another thing that attract entrepreneurs to us because that opens doors for them. Okay, and that's what they need. Finally, I think it's the diversity of experience. So David was kind enough to give my background. I'm a physician by training, got an MBA, worked at an investment bank, worked at a well-known venture group called Venrock, have operational experience as CEO in biotech companies. I bring all that to the table. Yair brings what he brings to the table. We have various different partners and members who are doctors. We have 3 MDs. We have like 12 PhDs. We have people with operational experience, marketing experience, finance experience, and all that together, we bring what we call aMoon Alpha. So that's a division from the vision of Yair, our founder, was to bring a whole group of people dedicated to helping our portfolio companies. Because in the end of the day, a lot of these startup companies come out of academia or other places and don't have business experience, don't know how to run a company, don't know how to hire people, don't know how to manage people. And so we have a division that's dedicated to helping our portfolio company in any aspect that they need. And I think that those are the reasons that entrepreneurs come to us.
Thank you very much. Larry, do you want to give us the view from the other side of the table, please? What do founders and startups look for when they're going to a VC?
Well, first of all, let me just sort of explain to those who aren't familiar what exactly a tech commercialization or a tech transfer office is. Research universities have a lot of innovation, coming out. And I would say all through the 20th century, innovation, wherever it comes from, whenever there's an entrepreneur, they've cut their teeth usually with a university education. So universities are sort of
I think Larry has frozen on me.
Yeah, it seems to be frozen for a bit. Maybe I'll step in for a second and hopefully Larry will...
50 or 60 years ago, universities, about 50 or 60 years ago, universities, which had been strictly academic institutions and existed for the diffusion of knowledge, began to realize that
Okay, we're having some technical difficulty, Larry. You keep on freezing on us.
Perhaps I'll step in for a second. Hopefully, Larry, when he gets in, will correct everything that I said wrong. But
have knowledge.
Larry,
you have to have an.
Sorry, Larry. You keep on freezing. We missed what you said. For some reason, your computer's freezing on us.
I see myself okay. There's not a whole lot I can do, right? I mean, is it still? You still have the problem?
At the moment,
no, now we're here.
Carry on.
We lost you 50 to 60 years ago.
Wow. Okay. Well, I've aged a bit since then. What I was saying is that universities that recognize that they have innovation to offer to the public, it's not enough just to have knowledge. You have to have an asset in order to be attractive to the industry. You have to have an asset. An asset usually means, a knowledge asset is in the form of intellectual property, patents, things like that. And so, again, this culture has sort of developed over the past 50 years or so of universities with valuable research, turning it into an asset by having an office that sort of sits at that bridge between industry, commercial side, and the academic side, and there's sort of an internal conflict as far as the academia is concerned, because traditionally for 1,000 years academia existed for the increase of human knowledge, for that noble purpose. And this sort of movement towards realizing monetary value from what we're doing does sort of, give a bit of a culture conflict. But be that as it may, that mandate of getting knowledge to the good of the public still exists, and that's our primary reason for existence is to do that. Now, the methods that we do that are varied, and I don't necessarily go into it now, but the thing for at least for the purposes of this discussion and how we can interact with VCs, we're sort of at polar ends of the initial stage of applied science. Okay, so we're at the birth. When you look at academic activity and laboratories, you're really looking at the birth of something new. And when you look at say the startup phase, where they're looking for their Series A or their seed money, that's much further down the path than you have coming out of a laboratory. Because what we typically are able to offer from a university is a scientist who may be an expert in his field, a very, very early stage proof of concept that may look exciting, and we'll have the passion and say, wow, this could change the world. But the big questions, or the questions that can really turn it into a game changer as a product or as a service, are very mundane type of questions. Is it cost effective? Is it robust? Is the market there? There's a lot of commercial questions around innovation that typically you won't have the answer for when you look at university innovation. So for me to take one of my scientists and walk into a VC auditorium and make a pitch would sound a little bit pathetic, because it's difficult for us to address the question. There wouldn't be a good communication, because the questions that are asked are going to be questions that we have not yet got the answer for. So it's what we call the valley of death, is the excitement that comes out of the innovation at a university versus the important commercial questions. Will it sell in Akron? Okay, and so that's the challenge of work with VCs. Now, all is not lost. Okay, and there are paths to get there, and there are activities that we do that bring our technologies further from that initial phase that I was talking about in the laboratory proof of concept to something that can end up being more attractive. But that's not for this evening, perhaps.
Larry, actually, one of my questions further down we'll get to, and you'll be able to actually address that a little bit more, because I want to talk about the Israel model versus the European and UK and USA model. So we'll get there in a minute. So let me just carry on with another question, if I may. And again, this is more for you, Gor, but going from my own experience within business and looking at companies, the key to any investment for us is always going to be about management teams and the founder and what he's doing about it. And it's not necessarily for us, when we look at a company, the concept or the drug or the idea or the technology behind it. It's really about the founder and the management team that's there. And you have different skill sets within management. You have the manager or the founder who's really good at taking a company from R&D to commercialization, who doesn't necessarily have who doesn't have the right skill set to take things from going from a non-revenue company to a company with revenue of tens of thousands. And it's a different skill set to go from tens of thousands of dollars to millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's even a different skill set to go and build a team of 10 people up to 100 or 1,000 people. So I'm sure, again, within VC, it's more difficult because you're dealing with egos and personalities, and you're dealing with things where it's the founder's baby. He's been looking at this drug or looking at this concept for quite a long time, and it's come out of his university, and he doesn't want to let go of it very quickly or ever. So again, when you're doing your due diligence, then you must see, I'm guessing, 1,000 companies a year. and you filter those down to 5 or 10, whatever it is you're doing. What are you looking for in those companies? Are you looking purely at a drug that's going to change the world, that's going to make the world a better place, a different technology which is going to change things in the world? Or are you looking more at the management team because you think, listen, if they don't get it right on this time, they might get it right the next time? Tell us a little bit how you go about doing that.
Thank you, David. This is a key question, and if I may paraphrase a little bit, there is no business plan that meets contact with the market unchanged. This doesn't happen. And so the most important thing, as you highlight, is the management team. Now, the management team may have to evolve. We actually have 2 funds at aMoon. We have a very early stage seed and A round fund, which means, to Larry's point, we go into the university, we may give $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 to get to the next step. Is the concept there? Is there some proof of concept? And then build a company around it. And we have a late stage fund, which, companies already have a management team when they come to us, and scientific proof of concept and generally human proof of concept. They're 2 different types of companies, as you point out. And I think it's very important that when you partner with a VC, to your earlier question, that you partner with somebody who can help those companies evolve correctly, okay? And it is an evolutionary process. But to your point, management is the most important thing, okay? Without a doubt, because things change, they have to be nimble. Science doesn't always work out the way expected. Experiments don't work, and they have to be willing to, get up off the floor and do it again and again and again. And we support that because we recognize that you learn a lot from things that fail as much as you learn from your success sometimes. So it's very important that when you partner with a VC, that you partner with somebody who recognizes that things are going to take longer. They're not going to, we always talk about the base case, but often the base case in our mind is like the good case. You have to make sure that you partner with somebody who's going to be there for the good and the bad, and for the hard. And it's never easy. To your point, though, it's also an important skill for a VC to develop to help the founders evolve, because at some point, and to Larry's point, you have an academic who's taking an idea and then building it into a company. They are at the beginning the world's expert in that science or technology, and they understand the difficulty from that point of view. But once you get beyond 3 or 4 people and you're a year into the company, it's a big change, because you have to think about 5 years down the road. You have to build towards that. And, you may be a great professor, but to your point, doesn't know anything about managing people, doesn't know anything about managing money. If you were to ask me what kills most companies, they don't manage their cash flows, okay? They don't recognize that, you have to match cash in to cash out. And for those of you who are not finance people, most companies don't get to run on credit, okay? If you don't have the money, things don't happen. And if you don't match when you need the money to when you're going to do things, you just come to a screeching halt. So, they don't have the finance background. We have to provide them the finance. We have to provide them, they may, again, great scientists, but they don't know anything about running a clinical trial. So you have to bring in the people and help that academic either evolve to become the CEO of the company, or help them recognize that if they want success, they need to step aside. And it's not an easy task.
Interesting. Yeah, I can
add one thing to that.
I can sympathize with that. Yeah, sure.
Can I add one thing to that, David? Sort of an anecdotal support to what Gur was saying. In my career, I've closed about 15 companies. Had to close about 15, or been involved in closing 15 companies, and we've had a few successes as well. Every single one of those 15, or not one of those 15, failed because of the science or technology. Every single one of them failed because of problems with management, various problems, or not getting along. So, it dovetails perfectly with what Gur is talking about, that the science is usually not the killer. When you can pivot around the science, you can't pivot around poor management.
Thank you, Larry. Larry, this one's more for you. So I did a little bit of work before I came on the call, and I spoke to a few people in the UK about the model which is used in the UK within some of the universities. And there are a couple of quite big companies here now. One is called the IP Group, which is a public company listed on the London Stock Exchange. Another one is Parkwalk Ventures, which is private. And the way they work with universities is actually quite fascinating. So what they do is they take over the tech transfer office of a university. they fund it. They either put their own people in, or they take on the university staff that are there already. They then continue to pump in money for R&D for some of the companies which are there. And when a company comes out of there, they get 50% of that company, and then they go out and they use their own contacts or their own funds to raise the Series A, Series B, or whatever they're doing next in order to get the external funds for the company. And it's working. I know it's working very well with Oxford University. It's worked very well with Imperial University as well, two great universities which some great technology has come out of. I haven't seen the same kind of model in Israel. Now, I know you've got the likes of aMoon, probably the most famous tech transfer office in Israel, which is out of Hebrew University. And they register a lot of patents. I think last count, there was something like over 8,000 patents which they have. They make a claim that there are $2 billion of annual revenue generated from companies that came out of Hebrew University. But I can't find any real facts about how much Hebrew U or aMoon takes out of these companies. And in fact, when you start to dig a little bit deeper, you see that things don't quite go according to plan. So you hear about hear about M Systems, which was sold to SanDisk, or you hear about even Mobileye, which was sold to Intel for $15 billion. And I'm not sure if the university has actually made much out of it. Both of those companies, SanDisk came out of Tel Aviv, M Systems came out of Tel Aviv University, Mobileye came out of Hebrew University, and I don't think either of them made much money out of it. And I think there's some litigation going around still on SanDisk on this one with M Systems. So Larry, what do you think we can do to help Israeli universities benefit from this ecosystem? Because it's there, it's ready to, I know a friend of mine tried to bring the IP group to Israel, and these universities in Israel were interested. So what do you think we can do here?
Okay, well, really to properly answer these questions, I think I'd rather dominate the rest of the evening because there's so much to talk about with what you said in that. But let me take the cases that you're absolutely correct that in many cases, the blockbusters that finally reached the market from technology transfer offices don't end up bringing huge revenues to the university. And there's a couple of good reasons that happens, okay? What you need to understand is that when we're doing our first licensing deals for our technology, the risk is super high, okay? Nobody knows if it's going to succeed. The university is typically at a disadvantage in the negotiation because the other side's holding all the cards, really. They're holding the money. Now, yes, we have this wonderful innovation, but nobody really knows if it's going to pan out. As I said, the risk is super huge. So the deal as you start off with it, the licensing deal that you make is not something you would do if it was much more advanced and it was de-risked. So you're starting off with a case where it's difficult to get very, very large numbers when you're doing a deal with a company or a VC on university technology to start with. That's number one. Number two is that from the time you do those initial deals until a product hits the market, it's going to be at least 5 years in case of high tech and maybe 8 to 10 years in case of a drug. Okay, you have a long period of the development of this technology. Now, what happens during that period? There's a couple of things that happen. Okay, number one, there's additional investment in the company, often millions or tens of millions of dollars, which will end up diluting the university as it started if it based on equity. That's number one. Okay, number two, the company is developing a lot of methods that are not necessarily dependent on the university technology. So they may start having income streams that don't directly impinge upon what the university actually gave them to start with. Okay, because they've been doing a lot of work around the technology and they see, oh, we shouldn't use this molecule, let's use something else. And thirdly, you have batteries of accountants and lawyers that are picking apart this license agreement in order to see how we can minimize the amount of payment that we actually have to pay to the university. So when something finally reaches the market, it's quite often that the numbers that end up getting back the money that actually gets back to the university is a lot smaller than you would have hoped for.
Which is why it makes sense to me what the IP Group and Parkwalk are doing, because what they're doing is they're both matching they've got the same goal as the university tech transfer department itself, in that they're trying to minimize the dilution which they have going along the whole journey. So as they're minimizing the dilution for themselves, they're obviously going to minimize the dilution for the university. So it would make sense to bring in a commercial company like a Parkwalk, like an IP Group at a very early stage, so that this can happen. And again, I don't know how it works in America, but I'm assuming in America, when you go to the NYUs who have had some great successes, because of the size of the budgets of the NYUs, they are probably hiring the top of the top people to run their tech transfer offices. They've got the exactly people like you, but the top, they are probably people who are been in commercial jobs, who have come over to run these things, and have the experience in VC as well. So I'm just wondering why Israel hasn't gone that route.
Okay, first of all, that's not 100% correct. When I was previously to Ariel, I was working at the Ramod, which is the technology commercialization office at Tel Aviv University, and we did something similar called the Momentum Fund, which was anchored by Tata Industries of India, where they did something quite similar to what you're talking about. It wasn't quite across the board where they come in and they sort of get first look at everything in the university, but there was a wide selection where they had first look at technologies, and then they could, together with the university, decide to set up companies around that. They ended up investing about $20 million, or together with partners, $20 million to increase the value of technologies and sort of make a set of mini startups. So it's not the case that it never happens. It hasn't caught on a whole lot. I mean, I would say that maybe less because we're not interested. Rather, it's difficult to find the partners that are willing to commit to these kinds of investments in such early stage technologies, because, like I said, the risk is very, very high. The time to pay out is very, very long. You're right. When I've been in contact with some of the UK academic institutions, and I did get a chance to see some of that. It can pay off as well, and it's certainly something that we should continue to look at. We tried several times at Ariel. I think we were a little bit too early in what we could offer to such groups that would, take over and invest as well. But it's definitely, the proof is in the success that you can see, and that I think Israel is moving in that direction as well.
So David, if I may
sure, go ahead
for a second. I think part of it is the lack of understanding of how the venture model actually works to a certain extent. And I don't mean that on the part of the TTO, I mean that on the part of universities and other people in general. So if you think about it, a TTO may offer a new technology. I'm going to do a deal. It's going to be, let's say, $10,000, $15,000, maybe $50,000, maybe $100,000 upfront to license the technology, right? There's going to be a royalty. So eventually they get 2, 3, 4, 5% of sales. And there are probably some milestone payments. In my world, in the drug world, if you get to phase 3, you owe something. And if you get approved, there's another $250,000. And they want 5% of the company. Okay, that's a deal, right? If they get 5%, usually they don't get that much, but fine, 5% of the company if it's really great. The problem is that they're going to get diluted out of the next rounds, right? Because they're not putting in any more money. So all they ever really get in the end of the day is the royalties. If the company's successful in getting sales, then they will see a return. I think there are models where what the universities, if people are interested in early seed investing, for what it's worth, and there are models like this. Osage is a fund that does this in the United States, or used to do this in the United States, is to basically say, listen, we're gonna help you support that 5%. So we're gonna look at your covey of companies, and we're gonna take the top 10, top 15, whatever it is, And we're going to put in that 5% pro rata, and we're going to keep that 5% pro rata because at that point, it's the cheapest money in the world. Okay. And as long as you support that 5% pro rata, if you're selling a $1 billion company, you get 5% of it, you're very happy. You didn't have to put that much money in for it. And if there were a way for the universities to keep putting in their pro rata in the best companies that they could find, you would actually see a real return.
So with Osage, Gore, just explain to me, what did the university, I mean, Osage are putting in the next round of finance to keep them at the 5%. What does the university get that they wouldn't have got had Osage not come in?
So essentially what happens, let's assume they're going to make a split on the profit, right? We're going to put the money in, we're going to take your 5% ownership. We're going to keep supporting the 5% ownership. In a $1 billion company, that's going to be $50 million, right? And I have to give you back some of that $50 million.
It's a model. Okay, get the model.
For buying the percentage, right?
Interesting. I think, Larry, what I'd like to do, please God, after COVID finishes, I'll pick up the phone with some of my contacts at the IP group and at Park Walk, and I'll try and persuade them to come over to Israel to see some of the universities again and see if we can try and do something with them, because I think there's a great opportunity here, because Israel is known as being the startup nation, which is what I'd like to try and get onto next, really. So it's a tiny country, Israel, definitely compared to what's going on in the USA and Europe, but we are known for being the startup nation. But we're known in the startup nation more from the high-tech side of things. And on the high-tech side of things, you hear about all these great entrepreneurs who have leveraged their time in the IDF, in the Israel Defense Forces, and come out with something which then used to take to the next stage. And they build these great companies. Then you look at the Wazes of this world, and it's a Shmona Matayim guy, it's a guy from the 8200 unit or from another special IDF forces unit, or it's a cyber company, it's an AI company. All these companies, they get their inspiration from the IDF per se. And what I'm wondering about is, does the startup nation apply to health tech and biotech in the same way as it applies to high tech in Israel? I know you said before, Gord, that there are 83,000 jobs in health tech in Israel and 1,680 healthcare companies. I don't know how that compares to the high tech industry, but it must be a fraction of it. So the question for both of you is, where does the inspiration come for the health tech and the biotech in Israel? Because I can't imagine that's coming out of the army. That's got to be coming out from somewhere else. And then where's it going to come from in the future? How do we make sure that there's more health tech and there's more biotech coming out from Israel, and it's on the same playing field as high tech in Israel?
I think before Gore answers on, I would actually take issue with what your premise. I would say if someone stopped someone in the street and said, "What is Israel's great innovations?" From what I see, it's very heavy towards healthcare, drug delivery, new drugs, as opposed to high tech. Maybe there's a little bit more hype in the high tech, but if you look, at least from where I sit, that is across the universities, I would say 75% of any success and revenue stream is all from healthcare.
Within universities, I agree with you, because what's coming out of the universities is the biotech and is the healthcare.
Absolutely.
But if you look out of Israel as a whole, it's much more about high tech. So you talk to the R crowds of this world, and you look at the number of companies that R crowd have got, which is in high tech over biotech and health tech. It's very, very much more towards the high tech side of thing. And again, I think part of that is because of what goes on in the IDF and the inspiration that these entrepreneurs get from within the IDF. But Gur, I can see you've put up something on the screen for us. So if you want to talk through this.
I'll make several comments. First of all, you'd be surprised how Israel actually measures up. I think we definitely punch over our weight class. 1,600 life science companies in Israel compared to 1,000 life science companies in New York. And if you know the two big areas, Boston and San Francisco area, we compare quite favorably in terms of the number of startup companies in the healthcare. So I just wanted to share that. But to answer your question, I think actually the Army is extremely important for health tech in Israel. And it's important for several reasons. So first of all, the Army is a great place to get management experience, okay? You're taking a young person and you're teaching them how to make decisions. Management is very much about making decisions with little pieces of data and thinking strategically and getting it there. And I think the fact that you have all these people going through these amazing programs, as an example, Marius, one of our co-founders, was a graduate of Talpiot, where they take, the best and the brightest of the high school class and they teach them physics, math, and how to make the next generation of weapons. And he worked on one of the early generations of Iron Dome. So that's the first thing. So I think the fact that they get management experience is important, and they're taught how to think critically. So that's very important. The second thing I'll tell you is you see a lot of health tech now transferring people who succeeded in tech transferring over to health tech. Okay, that's true for several of our portfolio companies, because what's different about medicine today than 20 years ago, and Israel is a really pioneer in this area, is that we have so much data now. We're capturing data in electronic medical records. And unlike the rest of the world, Israel has had electronic medical records of 98% of its population for the last 20 years. And that is an incredible treasure of information that can help create innovation in healthcare. And so I think that when you take these people who truly understand the 8200 guides, actually one of my, Tamar Falfa-Becker, who's a PhD in neurobiology, did a postdoc at the NIH, and really phenomenal asset to our companies, one of my analysts, okay? She came out of the 8200, right? And she brings a few things. First of all, she brings great critical thinking. Second of all, she brings a great network, right? She calls up the 8200 folk, and there's a network in Israel like you wouldn't believe. And you hear about things. Other scientists who are in the 8200, we get great deal flow from that. And in reverse, we get great access to universities where they're training. So I think the whole Army thing makes a tremendous difference. And then you finally, because of this treasure trove of data, you get a lot of startup companies that are using this data and combining it with the cyber. So Zebra, one of our companies, which is using AI and algorithms to help read X-rays, right? And it may sound easy, but it can make a big difference, because they can identify when somebody has a brain bleed and let the radiologist know that you have to look at this X-ray now, not in 2 hours when you feel like it. So I actually think that in Marius, it's one of the themes of our fund, actually, that, where cybersecurity was big, okay, don't get me wrong, it was a big innovation for Israel. He sees the common convergence between technology, data, and healthcare as a tsunami compared to that one.
That's great. That's really great. Larry, is there anything else you want to add on to that?
Going back to, again, I'm looking at it from the university perspective, we get an enormous amount of funding from the Ministry of Defense. And surprisingly, I would say about 40% of that is medical, is life sciences, because obviously the Army, in addition to, working on weapons and things like that, is very concerned about the welfare of soldiers. And so a very large part of the funding is towards medical as well. So the military is a large funder of research all across the board at universities.
Thank you. Before I forget, if anyone has any questions which they want to put on the Zoom group chat, we're coming up to the last 10 minutes or so. So please go ahead and stick them in there, and I'll see if I can pass them on to our panel. Larry, you were talking about the IDF and getting funding from the Defense Forces. What about government and industry in fostering the cooperation between VCs and academia? What can they do more to help this, do you think?
Well, a lot of people like to slam the government for whatever reason, and I'm sure I'm one of them too. But in this particular area of fostering cooperation between academia and industry, I think the Israeli government is not doing a bad job. They're doing a pretty good job. The Israel Innovation Authority supports many different programs specifically tailored to help industry interface with academia. And it's only available to tap into certain funds if an industrial partner works together with an Israeli university. So we definitely tap into that an enormous amount, and that builds many different relationships with industries. On that point, however, if you're asking what could be done to do more, those programs are strictly Israel within Israel. And although there are many binational funds between European, or actually across the whole world, United States, Asia, between various countries and Israel, binational funds, they're typically between companies from each side. And what we have a lack of is this similar type of including academia with support from both nations with academic research. So I think that's an area that if the government could consider also encouraging those types of collaborations, international, where one of the partners is an academic institution, I think that would be a big boon to us.
Thank you. Go. Anything you want to say about government in Israel? Can they help the VC world any more than they're doing now?
No, I actually think they're really helpful in the VC world. To echo what Larry said, the Israel Innovation Authority is, I think it's unequaled almost anywhere else in the world, and they have provided a tremendous amount of capital and support. It made a lot of difference for startups. I will also tell you from personal experience as an example, when we look at different countries, France is an example. I was there about a year and a half ago for a conference, a health tech investor day conference for European startups. And I happened to have reached out through one of my colleagues to the Israeli consulate in France, and they were extremely helpful in putting us in contact with, some other funds in France, and really just looking to make sure that they could be of service. So I actually think if it's much like anything else. If you know it's there and you know how to access it, the Israeli government is actually quite helpful.
I'm delighted to hear. It's the first time I've heard anything positive said about the Israeli government in many a month, if I may say. I haven't got any questions coming through. So, Gor, let me ask you, you're seeing lots of companies. What are you focusing on? What do you think is the right thing for you to focus on? Again, you can bring up COVID now if you want to, come towards the end, so I can take a couple of minutes.
So we're actually anti-COVID. Let me start out with that. We have not made a COVID investment. And I'm not saying there isn't money to be made in COVID, because there is. But I would just tell you, we don't particularly care for momentum ideas, because you never know when the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah.
We would consider a COVID company if the technology had application outside of COVID. So it's okay to take a risk on COVID where you know that you've spread the risk out. If it doesn't necessarily get there in COVID for whatever reason, it'll get there in something else. So that we would do. But COVID directly, much like you, I'm happy to go past it. What I am looking at, so, we can talk about different areas, what makes a good investment. In the end of the day, to your point earlier, not me personally, but I would say the fund, our late stage fund probably sees about 650 opportunities a year, okay, of which we're going to make 4 to 6 investments. And so how do you choose those 4 to 6 investments? That's really the key question here. And so the first thing I'll tell you is we're a late stage fund. We have early stage, so they're a little bit different than we are. But from a late stage fund, on the pharma side, which is what I deal with, there are 4 things to a good investment. There's well understood biology. There's the replication of the biology of the human being. Did you see what you expected to see? Does it make sense? In other words, if you tell me the biology mechanism of action is this, and you get a different clinical response, something's not working. Okay? And if you don't understand the biology and you're not seeing it replicated in the clinical response, you're in trouble. The third thing is deep pockets. Hopefully that's what we provide. And the fourth thing is a good syndicate and management. Okay. So good syndicate is part of the deep pockets. Good management is key. So those are the things we look at. And specifically within different indications, like where am I scientifically interested? So first of all, technology has to be disruptive. We're looking for cures. I'm not saying everything we're going to do is involving a cure. We do digital and other type of stuff. But I will tell you that one of the things that's really different about this decade in 2020 of healthcare that is different from the last several millennium is that we're actually getting to cures. Okay, I can tell you as an internist, when I was a general practitioner, I treated people's hypertension, I treated diabetes. Did I cure anything? Never. Maybe the cold. Give somebody an antibiotic, I got them over the bacterial infection. But cures were rare. But in 2020, we have gene therapy, we're curing people. We have RNA technologies. We are doing things that we can never do before. And that's where we're looking. We're looking for innovation. We're looking for disruption. We're looking for cancer cure. If you ask me where is a lot of our attention focused, I'll tell you where most of the innovation is focused in the world. It's cancer, neurologic diseases, and orphan disorders. I'm happy to explain what those mean in the last 5 minutes. I'm going to leave Larry some time. And we're looking, I think, to be impactful. And in the end of the day, we're looking to do well by doing good.
Okay, Larry?
Well, one of the discussions we had at the university, or not at the university, but my board of directors at the Tech Transfer Office was, should we continue to support everything across the university, or should we focus on certain areas of excellence and put our funds and put our activities there and sort of let the other stuff go by the wayside? And that was a very difficult discussion because, once you decide to have preferential treatment for certain areas, and it could be like cancer research or gene therapy or new types of foods, or whatever it is, you're leaving others out. And in the end, we sort of went back to our roots and we said, well, what really is our mandate? And I really want to emphasize this, that we're not just looking to bring in money to the university. We want to provide more service to the public and to our researchers than just what does my bottom line look at? And yes, I do have a bottom line, but that's not the only thing that we're measured on. And part of what we're measured on is, have we been able to bring more research money to researchers, even if it doesn't end up being a deal? And our decision was, in the end, we are going to continue to support all of our research all across the board. Of course, naturally they have to have a translational type of research, but we're not going to focus on one area as opposed to another. I think most universities work the same way, where, I've financed technologies in film, in psychology, in physiotherapy. Well, physiotherapy is more mainstream, but things that are sort of off the path. And we're not sorry we did it, because if this helps technologies get out to the public, to the benefit of the public, even if we're not making a lot of money out of it, that's part of our mandate, and that's part of what we want to do to support the university and the research.
That's great, thank you. I was actually going to ask you about wine, but about wine, and because I know Ariel is quite famous for its wine, but I've got a question coming in, which is more of a challenge, I think, for Gore. So the question is that if the key problem with academics is management, and the key problem with universities is them not getting enough from the upside, why doesn't aMoon, who's got both the money and the management, set up a service to tackle that problem and partner with the universities?
We do. I don't know about a service, but we have a fund, an early stage seed fund that's trying to partner with universities. They have connections with the tech transfer offices. And, like anything else, though, we have to return returns to our LPs. And so we have to narrow it down to the very, very best of the very best. So we're not to your point, we're not a charity. We're looking for the best companies in the world. And if we find them at a university, we will build a company around it. And
I wish you much success with that.
If I could add to that, one thing I didn't mention, one of the channels that we have for commercialization, and again goes back to the Israel Innovation Authority, is the Technological Incubator Program. Okay, and that exactly answers that question you were asking about. In that case, the incubator program is an area where we can come with a proof of concept, with a scientist and a proof of concept and no management team, and we can go to one of the incubators and say, please help us find a manager, a business manager for this, and we have guaranteed funding from the government, and so that exactly comes to fill that hole that you were asking about, where we're not able to bring the whole business side of things, but we can partner with incubator programs, and that's another program from the Israeli government that's very helpful in that case.
Thank you, Larry. Gore, Larry, thank you both for your time today. Wishing you both much success in the future. And I hope we can do this next time in person. It'd be much nicer for me, at least, especially to come out to Israel. I haven't been there for quite a long time. I'd love to get there. Adrian, can I turn it back to you for concluding remarks?
Firstly, thank you very much to David for moderating the whole discussion, Gur and Larry for a really interesting discussion, and thanks to everybody who joined. I did want to add maybe just a couple of ideas that I had that came out of the conversation, is that I think one thing that's very exciting about a university campus for innovation is the fact, because we have interdisciplinary studies, it allows our startups to really draw from quite a wide breadth of different kinds of people. An example of a small project, or a big project that comes to mind, is we realized that through our health studies that there was a big problem in Judea Samaria of lung disease. And the research brought us to understand that it was related to the way that the Palestinians in the area were burning coal. Working with our medical studies and our engineering staff, we developed ways of developing clean coal, which, as we're developing, we suspect will bring down case for lung disease and early death quite drastically. Of course, the problem is pollution, which then also spreads across the country, so it brings the environmental aspect as well. So I think universities give that breadth of manpower and brain power that perhaps is hard to find in specialized areas of work, which concentrate on a certain kind of person. Also, so Gur mentions the idea of dealing with big data. So I know in our university, I'm sure the universities as well, we spend a lot of effort in training, whether it be the medical school, engineering, to deal with big data. And as we're developing that, the ability to take data, big data, analyze it, find it relevant, is important. And this way, all our starters can hook into a big data support base, which can maybe give them, especially the starting stages, a helping hand that you wouldn't maybe be able to find outside the university experience. And the other thing, the last idea that I was thinking of is Gur mentioned the need that they look for disruptive technology. Well, certainly anybody come out of the IDF, and maybe most armies are naturally able to link to the disruptive mentality, because whenever you're doing any kind of military activity, you need to be disruptive in how you're doing it. But there's nothing more disruptive than students in the world. So I think that it's a really rich ground for that kind of technology and mentality. So I think those three ideas maybe really make a university an ideal home for this kind of technology and innovation, and an exciting and attractive opportunity for investment funds. Just on that, so I just want to thank again everyone for joining. Our university is really working to change the bar and what's happening in the educational environment in Israel, to do good work that's going to affect the world in general. Like I said before, our cancer research is incredibly disruptive at the Schlesinger Center for Economic Studies is amazing work. We've got our cybersecurity center is being used to train one of my time 8200 and many other units and companies around the world. Of course, the cyber simulation center, the medical simulation center is giving services to the entire country. And we'd really be happy to anybody who's learn more about what Ariel does, how they could partner with us to maybe advance it. And we'd be very happy to be in contact. You can contact us through David, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And thank you all very much for this really interesting evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.